Welcome to the Flourish with Neural Retraining podcast. I'm your host, Madeline Lowry, founder of Twin Cities Neural Retraining and a certified MAP method practitioner, specializing in anxiety, sensitivities, and chronic symptoms and conditions. Join me for episode 74, where I will talk about how and why we can retrain the brain for chronic pain symptoms. These include back pain, joint pain, muscle aches, headaches, migraines, scar pain, or pain from old injuries, pain from conditions like arthritis and fibromyalgia. I will describe some examples of this with my clients and my own stories of pain relief as well. And then I will talk a little bit about the MAP program for chronic pain and how it can be used alongside live sessions with a MAP practitioner. As always, we must disclaim that the information we share in the podcast is for educational purposes only. As MAP method practitioners, we do not diagnose or treat disease. Instead, we work with the mind to optimize health. Let's get started. So let's talk about pain and the role of the brain, and in particular the subconscious mind in pain. Now remember that our pain is not created in the tissues of the body, although it does feel that way. Rather, all pain is an interpretation of a nerve impulse by the brain. There is no pain until that impulse arises from whatever part of the body, like your hip, your knee, your ankle, and is received by the brain, and the brain makes an interpretation of that impulse. Because of that, your mind can amplify pain. And we know that fear, stress, anxiety, and tension all increase our perception of pain. Now, people with recurring chronic pain have become hypersensitive to pain impulses. You could say that their brains overreact to pain signals. Neural retraining helps to change that by neutralizing the painful memories that led to our brains being hypersensitive, even if you don't know what those experiences are. So by using an advanced neural retraining method like MAP, and in MAP sessions, we work to reduce the fear by neutralizing past traumas or painful memories that have sensitized the alarm system or the danger sensing system of the brain. That's the limbic system. We also work with reducing resistance to the experience of the symptoms themselves, and changing the pain response pattern to reduce pain severity and duration. And we will talk a little bit more about the importance of resistance, why it is important that we work with that. I want you to, I want to make sure that a couple of these points are very clear. So all pain is an interpretation by the brain. And the brain, and here we are talking about the subconscious mind specifically, can amplify pain depending on its state and depending on its propensity to be hypersensitive or hyperreactive. And why would a person become hypersensitive or hyperreactive? This is due to our trauma history. And even if you are not a person that has a known significant trauma history, it can also be that for someone who's very sensitive, smaller painful events, a sequence of painful events, or an ongoing, continuing situation, that was an ongoing subconscious source of stress. Can also predispose the subconscious mind to be hyper-responsive to pain signals. Now, to really understand, how responsible the brain is for our perception of pain, I want you to recall the phenomenon of phantom pain. You may have heard of this, where someone who's had a limb or a finger or something amputated still has pain in that digit or in that limb after the amputation. Now think about that. Those nerves do not actually exist anymore. There is no finger, or there is no arm, or there is no hand. And yet, the brain can create a sensation of pain. And then, if you think about other situations, other times where we should be feeling a lot of pain and we are feeling none, such as when we are in shock, someone who's been in a car accident, someone who's been bitten by a shark. Often these people are able to do what they need to do to exit that car or to swim to shore to save their lives, and there is no pain until later. So, I always think about these extremes, right? Because phantom pain and shock, these are two extremes that show how much control the brain has over whether we are feeling pain or not. These to me show that the brain and the mind, the brain is like the hardware and the mind is like the software, but the mind has a lot to do with our perception of pain. And so naturally, working with the mind in situations where we have chronic ongoing pain, where we do not have an acute injury, right? When we have an acute injury, of course, there's a reason for pain. If you just burned your hand, it is going to be painful. But when that injury has been healed and it's been weeks now, months now, years now, and there is still pain, that is something where we should explore what is going on in the subconscious mind. Now, the MAP method, if you are not familiar with it, the MAP method is an energy psychology technique. It is the next generation of techniques that were introduced in the 1980s, like EMDR and tapping, or EFT, emotional freedom technique. It is the next generation, and I believe it is faster, gentler, goes deeper than the other precursor techniques of EMDR and tapping. With the MAP method, we have a perfect tool for exploring the subconscious mind and making changes to learned behaviors, conditioned behaviors that may be contributing to or amplifying our experience of pain. So I want to talk a little bit about the work of John Sarno. John Sarno, MD, was a physician, a Western-trained physician, who was a back pain specialist and worked at NYU's Rusk Center for Rehabilitative Medicine for 40 or 50 years. He was trained in the 1950s, and he has said that at the time that he was trained in medicine, it was just about the time where less emphasis was being placed on the role of the mind, that is, the role of the emotions and thoughts, on the body and on our health. In the 1960s, that was pretty much done away with in the medical curriculum because the focus changed to be much more about biochemistry, about pharmaceuticals. But he was educated near the tail end of that, and so he did get a bit of that. But anyway, so he graduated, and he, as I said, was a back pain specialist. He worked with many patients over his first 8 years of practice, and at first, during those 8 years, he used everything he was taught by Western medicine. He used medications, physical therapy, recommended surgery, and sometimes all three of these, to help his patients overcome chronic back pain. But he wasn't satisfied with his results. He felt that his results were quite hit and miss. And he decided to investigate further the role of the emotions and the thoughts and, the mental landscape in perpetuating chronic pain syndromes like back pain. So after 8 years of practicing the traditional Western way, he started to introduce some new concepts to his patients. He started to teach. He actually brought his patients in and he would give lectures. He would give lectures about the role of repressed emotions and how they can exacerbate pain. He talked a lot about the plight of the perfect and the good. In other words, the types of people that he observed would have or would develop chronic pain syndromes. The kind of person who's very conscientious, the kind of person that was raised to be, quote unquote, good, a high achiever, accomplished, disciplined, accommodating. The older sibling that is told that he or she must watch over the younger siblings, to the point of denying their own needs at times and their own emotions. And so he taught people to think about these issues. He had them explore through journaling any of the possible reasons that they may have bottled up some negative emotions like anger or rage, guilt, or shame, grief, or anything else really, around situations in their lives from their childhood on that could be contributing to some emotional pain, some repressed emotional pain that was acting out as physical pain. And so that was his approach for the next almost 40 years of practice. And he felt that he was getting better results through that methodology than he was at the beginning. Now, it doesn't mean that he threw away all of his medical training. Plenty of his patients were showing up in his office with their x-rays and with their scans of their abnormalities in their back, in their spine, that their previous practitioners or their previous physicians had told them were the cause of their back pain. And he would tell them that these abnormalities were normal abnormalities. In other words, if you took 10 people with the same type of scan, the same type of x-ray, that there would be those among those 10 that had back pain and those that did not. And so the scans alone could not explain fully their development and the continuation of their back pain symptoms. Now, like I said, he practiced for about 40 years. So after working exclusively with back pain patients, he started to broaden his practice because he found that the same principles seem to apply in all chronic pain syndromes, from back pain to migraines to gut pain, all kinds of joint pain, and pain from other kinds of causes. So Dr. Sarno was really the first modern-day physician to describe the role of emotions, of thoughts, of our history, our trauma history, in the development and the reinforcement of chronic pain symptoms. If you haven't read his books already, I do recommend The Mind-Body Prescription. That was his third book. The first two books were about back pain specifically. By the time he wrote his third book, he was applying his principles more broadly. So I think that is a good one to start with. As I was saying, with the MAP method, we have a tool with which we can explore what is going on in the subconscious mind and find the roots of pain patterns. Now, Dr. Sarno didn't have this. Remember, he started practicing in the late 50s, the late 1950s. So he didn't have the MAP method. The MAP method had not been developed yet. The precursor methods like EMDR and EFT weren't introduced until the 1980s. And even those took at least 20 years to become accepted, generally accepted. So while Dr. Sarno had the right ideas, he was moving in the right direction, he didn't have all of the tools that we have today. And so with the MAP method, we can do what he was doing through education, through having people journal, in a much more streamlined fashion. And we can work with the subconscious mind to really discover the root causes. Because, of course, not everyone was helped by education and journaling alone. There were still people for whom that wasn't enough. And even years of talk therapy weren't enough. But because the MAP method is the next generation of these energy psychology techniques, we no longer need to tap, we no longer need to do, bilateral stimulation. We allow the subconscious mind to do this itself. And it can do it more gently and more effectively. In the MAP for Chronic Pain program, which is a 4-week self-paced program, I've structured this to include educational modules and recorded MAP sessions that are designed to be used again and again with different topics, different subjects. And in this program, one of the concepts that I talk about is the pain cycle. The cycle that reinforces neural pathways that promote pain. And in the program, you can learn how this cycle is formed and what you can do to break it down. So I want to describe a few personal stories that illustrate the connection between what is going on in our mind and the presentation of pain. Now, I don't actually have chronic pain symptoms, but these are kind of examples of when pain has come up in my life and I've been able to trace it back to the originating events. So let me tell you about the time that our family was getting ready for a big trip. It was an international trip, and we had called for a Lyft or an Uber, and we'd had some trouble with Lyfts and Ubers in the past, or we had a, shall we say, painful incident with a Lyft or an Uber in the past because they had come to our house, and there are 5 members of our family, and not everyone was ready. Some of us were. He put our luggage in his trunk and proceeded to wait for a few minutes, and then began to get upset and irate because it had been more than 5 minutes since he'd arrived, and that is, that's as long as they're supposed to have to wait. And still not all the members of the family had shown up with their suitcases, and he yanked our suitcases out of the trunk and threw them on the sidewalk and drove away in a huff, which was quite shocking. It was scary, too, because we had a plane to catch, and so we had to start all over again and call another taxi. So with that backdrop, here we were waiting. The taxi had arrived, and we needed to, get going. And my husband said, so I had all the suitcases. Everybody was in the car. And my husband said, I have to go back through the house, but I'll come out through the back and lock it up, and then we can go. He went into the house, and he disappeared for 7 long minutes. And I can tell you it was 7 because I was focused on my watch, right? And I was thinking all kinds of toxic thoughts in my head. Ladies, I'm sure you know what this is like. And I was thinking, what is he doing? Where is he? Did he get lost in there? How is that even possible? He knows we have to get to the airport. He knows we cannot miss this plane. He knows what's at stake here. And you see what's going on, right? In my mind, it was a tension, right? Because I needed him to show up. I was afraid that this taxi driver was going to realize it had been more than 5 minutes and repeat that ugly scene that we had been through before on a different trip. So I needed to control my husband, get him in this car, but I couldn't. And so all of this is going on in my head for like 10 minutes. And then finally, he miraculously shows up and we are off to the airport. But it took me some time to recover. I'm sure this has happened to you, right? You're sitting there, you've been thinking all these toxic thoughts, and even though the event is now over, nothing bad actually happened. It takes a while to recover your equilibrium. And I noticed that I was having aches and pains, and I was just super uncomfortable on that flight. And this is an international flight, so there's actually multiple flights involved, many hours on the plane, and I was feeling pretty darn miserable, worse than I can remember feeling on any flight. And I started to think about this. Finally, hours later, probably 8 hours later, when we were making our connection. And if you have never had the thought of, now, what is it? What emotional upset did I have that is causing this pain? You are to be forgiven, because I am a MAP practitioner, and it took me hours and hours and hours to put it together that those 10 minutes of toxic thoughts had caused hours and hours of fibromyalgia type pain in my entire body. And when I finally caught on to this, and I sat down and I thought, now wait a minute, I am a MAP practitioner. I have tools here. And I got out my phone and I looked up the support, the MAP support audio files, the files that I have created for my clients, that my clients love and use all the time, but I never think about. When I sat down and I listened to the emotions audio file, followed by the pain audio file, followed by the inner peace audio file, maybe I even circled back to emotions again, all that pain finally melted away. And I felt fine again. And I tell you, that just reinforced for me the connection, between noticing pain arising in the body and tracing it back to what was the trigger for this? What just happened? If you like the author Martha Beck, she calls this technique walking back the cat. I can't remember how she explains why it's called walking back the cat, but she talks about just mentally tracing backwards from the onset of the symptom back to the moments of emotional distress or disconnect that you've had prior to that symptom showing up. That's a very good practice. If you've never done that, I suggest it, because it certainly has been helpful for me. I'll tell you about another time where the sudden appearance of pain made me take stock of what had happened recently. One weekend, we were setting off on a 4-hour car ride, and I got up that morning. Everything was fine until I bent over to do something, and there was this pain in my back, not like a muscle pain, but like a nerve pinchy kind of pain. And I never have this kind of pain, but I was having it then, and I thought, ooh, this is bad, because now I have to sit in a car for 4 hours, and I don't know how I'm going to do this. It was pretty bad. I could feel the pain running down my legs. And even after we arrived at our destination, it was a pretty uncomfortable car ride. When we arrived at our destination, I thought, well, I think I need to walk it out. Like, I don't know what I did. I was thinking about the exercising I had done, and was it the Pilates or the yoga class, or, was something different about the way I swam yesterday. I was thinking about all the physical exertion I had been doing and trying to figure out, what did I do to tweak my back like this? I couldn't really figure it out. So, but I thought, it's something to do with activity. And so I tried to walk it out. I went for a long walk on a path and I was by myself. And the pain was, it kind of, it got better and, it kind of came and went. Like it wasn't constant, but it's that kind of pinchy nerve pain in your back that, I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like an electric pain goes down your legs. And there were moments, multiple moments on that walk where I thought my legs are going to give out on me. I really felt like I had no control over my legs. Like that, I don't know. If you've ever experienced this kind of pain, I think you can relate. But the walk did not make it feel better. And, that night I was lying flat on my back on the floor, the drill, and I'm trying to do these different exercises. I'm trying to release whatever it is that has pinched that nerve in my back and is making life pretty unpleasant for me. And I'm embarrassed to say that it took me to like the next day to realize, now, wait a second here. Let's think about what happened. Think about the sequence of events that happened this weekend. And it occurred to me that the day before we left on that trip, the day before that pinching nerve pain appeared in my spine, that something pretty unpleasant happened. Let's call it a betrayal of trust. But the funny thing about it was that I would have said it wasn't emotionally intense for me. It was a contract that I had made with a company that had been canceled secretly without my knowledge. And the company never sent me notice that they'd canceled. And I had figured it out on my own by looking through credit card records and realizing that I had been refunded a payment. But I had still been counting on this service, this service to be performed. And so there was kind of a shock with that recognition of like, oh my gosh, what? This is not possible. But I think I immediately swallowed my emotions because I had to get on the phone and talk to the travel agency and the airline to figure out what the heck had happened. So it was this kind of a situation where I thought I was dealing pretty well with the hand I had been dealt, when in fact, apparently, I was not. I had repressed the painful emotions that I felt about this betrayal, this cancellation of services that I was not informed about, that I was counting on, and that if I hadn't found it myself, would have really devastated my family. So yeah, I thought I was dealing with it pretty well. But I think that many of us are conditioned to kind of swallow our anger, our resentment, our bitterness, our feeling of being betrayed, because we have to get on the phone and we have to deal with customer service, and we know that we won't get help unless we are rational, right? Unless we are logical and not emotional. And so when I walked back the cat again, and I realized that this thing had happened that I thought I was dealing with rather well, but my back was probably telling me that I wasn't, I was able to take appropriate action, do a map session on myself, and resolve that back pain. So just another experience that, again, illustrated for me that when it comes to pain, out of the blue, unexplained pain, it's different. Like if you break something, if you break a rib, like, yes, it's going to be sore. That's physiological pain. We're not going to be able to do that much with that. But when we are talking about pain that shows up out of the blue, pain that is unexplained, pain that is maybe unusual for you, it is worth thinking about what recently happened to you, what might have felt emotional, or maybe where may you have swallowed your emotions in order to be what society expects you to be, in order to be helped, in order to be a good citizen. What is it that you've swallowed that may be showing up in the body as pain? Now, I have had the privilege of working with so many people with different pain symptoms, and not all of them, it's not always the primary reason that they've come to see me, but, there's just many, many kinds of pain that I've worked with, and even things that you may not consider to be pain, but they are, let's just say, irritating sensations that affect us, that have a very strong negative impact on us. And that can include things like chronic itching, tingling sensations or like neuropathies, burning sensations, other persistent sensations that are distressing. So I just want to mention a few of the client stories that are already recorded in my podcast episodes. In episode 73, a recent episode, Tess talks about her chronic headaches, severe headaches, and how MAP has helped with that. Melissa, in episode 49, it's an episode that's mostly about thyroid health, but she also talks about how MAP sessions helped with her chronic back pain. Helen, in episode 40, that is a whole episode on relief of chronic pain through a set of MAP sessions. And Helen was someone with an autoimmune condition. She had a condition called ankylosing spondylitis, which is a very painful condition. And yet she felt that a set of MAP sessions was able to relieve her pain. Mostly. I mean, she wasn't done. She wasn't finished yet, but we had only done 6 or 8 sessions. So her results were very good considering the amount of time that we worked together. Dawn, in episode 47, she describes different kinds of pain. Some of that I would call fibromyalgia type aches, body aches and pain. And some of it was maybe more like nerve pains. Episode 44, you can hear Derek talking about stomach pains. He'd had chronic stomach pains for years when we started to work together. And he talks about how that was relieved through our work. And Scylla, in episode 56, talks about MAP for cancer pain. So there's so many stories already that you can refer to just in the client stories on this podcast. But in addition to those, there are clients that I've worked with. I mean, everyone's so individual, right? But clients that I've worked with where emotional stress was at the root of their pain. And I think of one client in particular who had chronic back pain. She had to take serious pain meds for a chronic back pain that had been with her for years after a bike accident. She was a very athletic woman. She'd gone on a mountain biking trip, took a spill on a mountain, and ended up with debilitating back pain. She felt a lot of guilt about that. She felt a lot of shame about that. A lot of regret over having made the decision to take that bike trip. She felt that she ruined her own life and that of her husband's because they were a very active couple. They used to be very active together. And since that bike accident, she hadn't been able to be active at all. It impacted both their lives. And we found through working with some of those memories that there was a lot of self-blame, a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, as I said, that was exacerbating the experience of back pain. I worked with people where there are, significant triggers that are connected to their experience of pain. I remember working with one woman who had migraine headaches every day. And I said to her, I was talking to her about the pain, and I said, well, do you have them all day? I mean, do you wake up with the migraines? Oh, no, she said, but they do come on after lunch. And I said, oh, well, what time do they come on? When after lunch? And she said, oh, they come on every day at about a little after 3. And I thought, that sounds odd. And I asked her, well, what is the significance of that time of day for you? And she didn't know. As we worked through this in a map session, I think we did a few map sessions actually on her migraines. But as we worked together, what we learned was that there was something about childhood memories. And when the clock hit 3:15, that was the time she was released from school. She was a latchkey child, and she felt kind of out of sorts. She didn't know what to do with herself. It wasn't a happy time for her. She was disconnected, felt that she was lacking nurturing, to be a young child, an elementary school child, and to go home to an empty house. And, that seemed to be the root of the pattern. Not that it was the only contributor, but something about that time of day, even to this point, when she was an adult, decades later, was triggering something for her and causing migraines for her. I've seen beliefs and behaviors be at the root of chronic pain syndromes. And I can remember working with someone who had really severe jaw pain. I can remember asking her, can you describe what that jaw pain feels like to me? And she was describing it like a red, hot ball bearing, in her jaw. Very severe jaw pain. And again, as we were working through this in sessions, in one of the sessions, I can remember her saying, it was like near the end of the session, she said, oh my gosh, during that last round, when you were talking to my subconscious mind, she said, I had a sudden insight. She said, the thought came into my mind, I can change the way I am in relationships. And all of a sudden, that pain, that insistent, persistent, severe pain, which she had rated pretty highly, from 0 to 10, she had rated pretty high on the scale, disappeared for a moment. And it was like an insight for her. There was something about that she needed to change in her life, right? She needed to address something about how she was being in her relationships and the tension in the jaw. It receded. It gave her the confidence that this was a clue that she needed to follow in her life. In terms of resistance, I can remember working with a client who had a Parkinson's type syndrome. I can't remember if she was actually diagnosed with Parkinson's, but it was Parkinson's-like. And I remember having her describe to me what it was like, what the symptoms felt like. Tell me about a memory when the symptoms were the worst, something recent, where the symptoms were the worst. And she was describing being in a car, and she was going somewhere with her daughter, and her daughter was driving, and she was sitting in the back seat, and she was in extreme pain, discomfort, and she was trying to hide it. I was puzzled by this, and I said, well, why were you trying to hide it? And she said, well, because when I'm with my daughter, I don't like to be an inconvenience, and so I was trying to control what I was feeling. I recognized that she was resisting her symptoms. She was resisting. She was trying to cover up. She was trying to hide. She was trying to make them go away, right? She didn't want to be a burden on her daughter. She didn't want to have to admit how badly she was feeling. But that resistance was just feeding her pain cycle. It was making things worse. Because to the subconscious mind, the existence of these pain symptoms was a threat. It was a threat to her relationship with her daughter. It was a threat in how, it was going to affect how her daughter felt about her, how her daughter treated her. And when the subconscious mind feels like it's in the presence of a threat, it is going to amplify those perceptions of pain. So I hope that this is starting to kind of give you a sketch, a kind of an idea of all the different ways that pain can be motivated, that pain can be reinforced, that pain can be perpetuated by things going on in the mind. Our emotions, our stresses, different triggers, different beliefs that we have, behaviors that we engage in, and resistance to our own experience. For every person, it is different. And that is why, even though you can do a lot of groundwork on your own with a program like the MAP for a chronic pain program, it is important to do sessions with a practitioner as well, because it's only by working with a practitioner that we can really ferret out these root causes that are particular to you. It is only by working one-on-one in live sessions over Zoom that we can get to some of the unique aspects of, what might be a contributing factor for you. And so I hope that this discussion has been enlightening for you, that it has maybe answered some questions or opened some questions for you, maybe giving you a reason to explore working with the mind around chronic pain symptoms. And I hope that you decide, if you haven't ever thought about it before, I hope that you will explore through neural retraining or some other method of working with the mind what is behind your experience of pain or chronic pain symptoms. Thank you for listening. Thanks for joining us for the Flourish with Neural Retraining podcast. Please listen again and remember to follow us and leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, or Pandora. Check out our free courses about the MAP method and all of our MAP programs at mapforhealth.us. Or schedule your introductory MAP session at tcneuralretraining.com. Until the next time, be well and flourish. Content of this podcast, copyright 2024 by Twin Cities Neural Retraining. Music by Barbara Ben.